Okay, I'm going to call this one here just arrays. And then, now arrays are very important. Okay, you learned yesterday how to create single dimensional arrays and also what's called the parallel arrays. I hope you remember what they are and why they're useful. If not, we will go over them again. And I'm going to show you how you can apply that to our project. It's really important. Okay, so here we go. In this form here, I'm going to create just a very simple button so that when I click it, it's going to process some array data and will output right back out to the list here, right? So add a button here. Imagine this is like, you know, something in your game and you do something here, okay? So I'm going to call this button, call it, just say process for now. And then the button will be btn process. I'm going to change the font to something a little bit bigger. 25 as usual, and we're good here. Okay, so I click the button here, and I'm going to process some data and output to the screen here as well. So I'll put that into a, what should we put into? Put to a list box. Okay, we used that before. A list box, as you know, is like an array. We mentioned that it has an index position, right? A row by row. It's just a one-dimensional array. It doesn't have columns in here yet. That would be different, but for now it looks just like array. Okay, so I'm going to go here to the list box. I'll call it LST and result or output. And I'm going to change the font to be a little bit bigger as well. I will use 25 as well, so nice and big. Okay, I'm done with these. I'm going to turn this off. So I need some screen here. Put the message here. And we'll modify this later. All right, so now I'm going to double click the process button. It loads my code. I don't need this toolbox anymore. I can close that for now or unpin it. And here we are. The initialization part goes here. So when we start our game, initialization occurs in here. The button is an event only. Okay, so you learned that you create an array in C# by doing something like, for example, an array of a string. Okay, string followed by a pair of square brackets, and then the name of that string could be names. And then equals to new string, the same data type you see here, followed by the size of that array. You put a square bracket and the size, let's just say 3 names. Okay, that's how you declare an array of type string stored to a variable or container called names, and that's going to be of size 3. And the index will start from 0 to 2. Okay, it will be the one less than this one here. This is the size of the array. The index is one less than that. That's one way to declare an array. Now the array is created and you have empty data inside those slots, 0, 2, and 3. And because C# is a strictly typed language, you cannot mix data types. If you store as a string, then your names will only store text. Right? You cannot put numbers in there or characters or any Boolean objects. Okay, that's why you are restricted to only certain type. And so if I were to use these names as you guys, as students, and if I want to track your ID as well, well, you cannot put into the name class string here. I have to create another one of the same size to share the exact same index to track your name, your email addresses, or your student IDs, and your grade, and so on. So you can see each container has its own arrays, and that's important because you cannot do that in a single array. And I'll show you later how we can kind of fix that. But for now, so here's an array of names, nothing in there yet. And to set data into the names, you would reference its index using the index or the subscript from 0 to 2, right? So the first one could be, I don't know, Alex remember your name now. Names 1 could be string, so it has to be double quotes actually, not single quotes, double quotes. Would have been okay in JavaScript, but not in C#. So number 2 could be Zoe, and then names 3 could be let's go quick cam, okay? So 3. I mean, no, this is incorrect. It'll be 2. If you use 3, it'll be out. And so that is how you create a string of a list of names. And I'm limited to 3 because I said it's going to be only 3. You cannot go more than 3. Okay, you cannot add more. Once you add it here, 3, set that's fixed. And you're done there. So now when I click on this button, it's going to go and display this information to the list box. So this is just processing data. So I'm going to output here to the list box by using those index numbers. So I could say lst result.add items, right? Items.add. We're going to add names of 0 to that list. I'm just going to copy and paste this a few times. I'm adding 1 per line. I could put all together in a single line, that's fine, but I don't choose to do that. So when you run this program, and when I click on the process, it's going to add those names in here. Okay, 1 per line. So each of these is the index of 0, index of 1, and so on in this list box also. Okay, so I'm putting the same line. If you want to put in the same line, you put it here. Put names 1 here. You put a it's a string, so put a comma here, and then you put plus and plus and plus and so on. Right? Plus names, 1. Let's just say I add 2 here. Okay, and then you see that it's just a string. I put 2 names in there per line. So this is 1 per line, or this is 2 per line. Okay, so you learned to do that. You also learned, I hope, to add names directly without doing this way. This is just one way. Another way is, let me comment these out. You can do it directly. Go string index, array names equal to, and you put in curly braces here. So curly braces, inside the curly braces, you put the actual name in there. So again, Alex, Zoe, yeah. So that is much shorter, right? You don't have to specify the size. This is if you know what the data are. If you don't know, then you can specify the size, reserve that space, and you can add the names later to that list. But if you know exactly what they are, you can do it this way. It's shortcut, and whatever you put in here, how many elements you put here, will determine the size. So from this point on, the size of the name is going to be 3. Okay, if I add 1 more, then it will be more, right? So let's see. If I add like Jack in here. So I have 4 now, right? It's a little bit more dynamic in this way, I guess. Not that dynamic, but you can create here randomly if you want to. Okay, generate a random list of names, and you keep adding here until you reach the end of that list and you stop. And so this name will be sized based on how many you have in here. Okay. So now if you run this, it should still work. I'm just accessing the same element, and then I didn't put a 4th person here, but that is there. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Now, why is it important to use parallel arrays? I mentioned that you can track Alex's grade and your student ID and so on. But what about in our game? Okay, you think about this in the game. These names, let's just say these are our enemies. Sorry, guys. Okay, these are our enemies, right? A list of enemies, and those are enemies' names. And you also need to score their HP, right? So this will be like a, let's just say we use integer for HP. So you can put out here, and then here I'll put HPs for each of those, and let's just say from, I don't know, from 0 to 100. So yours would be at 89, Zoe's is at 97, Cam is at 75, and then Jack is at 35. Okay, so you map to each person's HPs. Okay, and so that's how you do it, right? Because when you check the index for, okay, I have in my room, I'm going to show two enemies. Okay, one randomly selected from index 0 through index 3. 0, 1, 2, and 3. I could pick two enemies from the list. Let's just say index 0 and index 2. And index 0 gets Alex's name, and the HPs to go with Alex's, right? And Cam will be the same thing. So you get the associating data correctly mapped to the correct object here. And if they have their own weapons, well, you can do that too. So string list of weapons, what kind of weapons they have. So again, you put the name here and make sure they match what those things are. Well, Alex, let's say you just have a rock. Sorry, Alex. So we have a knife, and then Kim has this. I don't know what it is. What, slingshot? Man. And then Jack has a what do you have? I guess you have a gun, I guess. Okay, so you have your weapons are mapped to the correct names here, and so on. Okay, so that means when I output information about a particular item or person, I can map their data. So here you can use the loops. We learned about loops last time, the for loops, right? So we know the size of these arrays are all size of 4, and so you can say for int of I from 0 to I less than the length of 4. So you can say 4 here if you want, but that's not really efficient, because what if I change the size? I have to go back and change 4 or 5 and so on. So you can say names.length. Okay, that will tell you the length of that size automatically. And then I++. And then now I can go into the loop. We learned this last week. And I can add to that list. So I can say list result.items.add. I'm going to add each individual objects, names and HPs in here. So the first is going to be the names of I, which is 0. And then plus the HP, right? You can put that here. You can say, for now. So plus the HPs of I, plus, just put some commas in here, and then the weapons of I. Okay? So you see that now, every line is going to put the information there. I'm grabbing the names at 0 position, HPs at the 0 position, weapons at the 0 position. All this pertains to Alex's information. The next round goes to Zoe's, Cam's, and Jack's, and so on. So when you run this application, you see their information here. Okay? You can see that they're all mapped properly and correctly. So you want to make sure that the order of data you put into the arrays, they have to match exactly to the same name. Otherwise, you get incorrect data. Okay, so as you do this, you can track and so on. So if our bounty hunter happens to attack one of these characters, Alex, that he got a hit, and he got a pretty good hit, so -10, then you can go inside the list here and say the HPs of index 0 is -10. Okay? So that's why these are called parallel arrays, because they are parallel to each other based on the index. Index 0 always refers to the correct data. And so when you do this data entry, if you make a mistake, well, that's your fault, right? Because you don't put it correctly. And if you did put it correctly, you still get a different result. Then it's whoever is doing the coding that's the programmer's fault, right? Because you reference the incorrect index. So when you display an object, like when I click process, instead of saying the result here, you could randomly generate an enemy or groups of enemies in your scene. Here I'm just put the information here, but you could say something like, when I enter this room here, I'm going to generate a list of, let's just say, 3 enemies, and they will show up here. And just like here, I say I will show up 3 enemies. Maybe I'll show up 4 or 3. It doesn't matter. So in this case, for example, I'm here, I enter, and I show up 4 enemies. And these are the enemies. They're the name, their current HP levels, and the weapons that they have at that time. So our hero, the bounty hunter, is going to attack these 4 enemies. And since we, agree that we're going to do this at it's a turn-based game, then we can put a button here. You can say attack. Okay, attack. We can do attack all of them, or you can have an attack each individual enemy. You can select them. So here you can say, I'm going to choose a Zoe first, or maybe a Jack first, because it's the weaker one, and I'm going to attack. Right? So you can pick their attack, and then we will randomly generate a number of the attack strength, and we'll see if Jack gets hit or not. Well, also, when you do this, though, you have to deal with the AI as well, because Jack has to also have some kind of defense mechanism, right? So you can just based on random numbers. Okay, so maybe if you do a random number between 1 and 10, and if our random number is larger than Jack's random number, then he got hit. Okay, if his number is larger than ours, then he was able to defend himself. Something like that, right? In the game. Because we're not going to do any GUI or animations in here. So you just do real simple like that. So when I click on attack for Jack, and then when we do the attack function, we randomly generate those 2 numbers, one for Jack, one for us, and we compare those 2 numbers. If our number is larger, let's just say we generate an 8 and Jack got a 5. So we can take the difference of those 2, which is a 3, and we'll subtract 3 from Jack's HP. He got hit, he got 3 points off, right? And we'll update that list right away, so when you refresh the screen, you'll see his number going down. Okay? You can show by numbers, or I showed you last week how you can use the let's say the progress bar to show that as well. It's a progress bar for Jack. Here I put it on the list here. You could have like a little button here, or one information here for each individual enemy. And if you want to attack, if you think you are strong enough, you can attack all of them. You can do that as well. Maybe you have a button here to select all and just attack all. And then they'll attack you after that. So you take turn. Okay? So this is one way how you can track your data using arrays. And that's why arrays are really, really useful in this scenario. Because you cannot track, imagine you have to track each of these individually. You're going to have 4 variables here, 8 for these, and then 4 more for these. So you have 4, 8, 12 variables. That's a lot. Here we only have 3. Okay? And next time when we learn about objects, which I will be teaching you guys really soon when we start creating our hero, because we need to create an object, you see that it's going to be much easier than doing this way. But we still need to use arrays in our objects. Okay, because our object, like our bounty hunter, might have a collection of weapons still. So we need to pick and choose which weapon to use when we do an attack or something. You can choose and say, okay, if Jack has he has a gun well, what kind of weapon can I use? Maybe I can use a grenade or something, right? Or whatever it is. And each weapon will have, I didn't put here, but you can have another weapon's strength, right? So you have attack and then you have defense and things like that, but don't want to get too complex here. All right, so this is the parallel arrays, and I give you an idea of how you can use it in your game or in your design when you think about your enemies. I think last Friday Zoe mentioned about creating a collection of enemies that we can choose from. It will be something like this. Okay, you can create an enemy of 10 types, and if you want to use those enemies in your scene or your level, you just grab that enemy's a list, and then you can randomly or just select one of those or 2 or 3 enemies and add to your scene. Okay, and that's something that we can come in agreement to and put into the main game so that we can all use and share in the game. And I think that's a pretty cool idea. And you see that it's very common in most games that you play. You see the same enemies over and over again. Some are very weak. As you move along, you will have some more, much more difficult to beat, but you still see those weak ones in there too. And they all come from a list of these existing enemies. But it would be very hard to track just by doing this way. And so next time, again, when I teach you about the objects, we're still going to be using arrays of enemies, but we're not going to track each array of enemies in weapons and HPs like this though. We just track the names of the enemies, and then that's it. Just one list. Inside each enemy, it's going to have its own individual HP, its own list of weapons, and so forth. Okay, we'll grab each weapons directly from that enemy object. But for now, I want you to understand these arrays, how to use them, and when to use them. Here I put HP as an array, but usually when you create a particular object, each object or each enemy or each person in there it's just 1 HP, right? So you're not going to have a list of HPs here, just 1. But weapons, yeah, you might have a couple weapons and you can swap them, right? So that's going to be an array. Okay, the score, it would be just 1. Your skills, it'll be just 1, right? And so on. And you might have like wardrobes or clothing or all those stuff. That could be another array of wardrobes, or what do you want to call it, armor, I guess. Okay, so this is the single array, parallel array. Now I want to talk about the 2-dimensional array. This is also very useful. And we learned about these single arrays. You can store only one type of data per row or per column. You can call this a row or a column. It doesn't really matter. It's still going to be just one list. Okay? Now, for a 2D array, that's also very important. Let's see what happened here. Did I lose some space? Okay. So this is the 2D array. A 2D array is like a table. That's all it is. It's a table of data. Excuse me. And this is very important as well, because one list is not enough, right? So you're going to have 2 lists put together, and then what you get is a 2D array. And if you want to think about what about 3D arrays, well, you have 2 2D arrays, you put together, you get 3D array, right? And you play 3D games, you know exactly what that means. It deals with X, Y, and Z coordinate system. But we're just going to go with the 2D here. So 2D, when you declare a 2D array, would be kind of similar to the 1D here, except you would do it a little bit differently. So another name for 2D is an array of arrays. Okay? Actually, an array of arrays. Of actually 1D array is more correct. but they still have to be the same type. So up here, for example, I have the HPs are integers, so I cannot use those. But the names and the weapons, right, they are both strings. Okay, so that means I can use them in the 2D arrays. So I'm going to go up here and put it up here so you can see. So remember that the 2D array is an array of 1D arrays. These are 1D arrays of the same type. Okay, so if we want to create another one here, let's just say string of, and the 2Ds, you put inside the brackets here a comma. Okay, one comma means 2D array because the first part is called the row, the second part is the column index. So it's a table, right? Row 0, column 0, row 0, column 1, and so on. So you reference it that way. That's why you put it here. But you're not going to put some numbers in here. Just put a comma to separate that. And then this would be like enemies. And then be same as above. You can say new string. And then here, what the size is. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a 2 by 4. 2 rows and 3 columns. Actually 4 columns. That's what it means. It's a 1 row, 2 row, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 2 by 4. And this is this is as integer, so I cannot put integers in here. Okay, only put strings. So now I have the enemies. This one here has 2 columns, and 2 rows and 4 columns. And I need to add inside these enemies here. So you can say now, I want to add this information here to this enemy. This is how you declare it. After that, you reference it by going to the enemies, the row of 0, comma, column 0. That's the first box on the upper left of the table, equals to whatever it is, maybe the name. So row 0 could be the name. Row 1, their weapons. Row 3, I could have another one here, maybe to show their locations. Okay? So row 0, column 0, that's row 0. Column 0, that's Alex. That's the name. If I want to get Zoe's name, that would be row 0, column 1. So row 0, column 1. That gives me Zoe's. Okay? So you can do that, and then you assign this to be Alex, and so on, like that. You can assign each manually this way. Okay, but I'll show you a different way. I'll show you the same way that we did above here, kind of like this. So instead of doing this way, I'm going to go inside here and say string, comma, enemies equals, oops, that's not the one I want, equals, so this is the outer bracket or curlies. Inside here, as you can see, 1 element, 2 element, 3 element, 4 element, and so on, right? So inside here is an array of arrays. Here's 1 array, 2 array, 3 array, and so on. Okay, so an array of arrays. That's what it means. So I have the first array is the names. So instead of doing that, I could put these information here in this first array. So that's the names. In the next group, I could just use a next line so you can see it better. And those would be the weapons. So I can put that in here. Okay. So now you see that I have, it looks like a table now. If I do it this way, right? Rows and columns. And it's going to align that here. So it's a 2D array because row 0, column 0, column 1, column 2, column 3. Row 2, column 0, 2, 3, and 4. Same thing, right? 1, 2, 3. So this is how you create a 2D array. If this is not clear, you can do it separately like this in their own single array. And then I just showed you that I grabbed that from here and I put it here, stick it here. So if this is not confusing, if it's too confusing, put the names here. Because it is, this one represents the whole thing here, right? Okay? So I could do the same here. I could put here the weapons. Didn't like it. Interesting. Okay, didn't let me do that, but let me see. Okay, I need to figure out why, because I thought you could do this. Local variable string names nested array initializing is expected. Okay, I'll figure out. But usually you can just do this, so that you don't have to manually put these in here. You can include arrays in here, and yeah, doesn't like it. I put it back as it was before, and I'll figure out why it's not doing that. Okay, so back to what was before, and so now the enemies has 1 row, 2 row. If I want to print them out, then I will have to reference the rows and column number in here, okay, and the enemies here. So let's just say that I want to add to the list the very bottom here. Oh, let's just forget about this loop here. Okay, let's comment that out, and I'll just add it to the loop to the list here, one by one. So I'm going to add the ls2 result dot items dot add. I want to add, the first one is the enemies of 0, 0. That's the name. So that would be Alex. Okay, that's Alex. If I go to the next line and put here row 1, row 2, I only have 2. So Alex, let's do the column. This is Zoe. This one here is Cam. This is Jack. Okay, so if you see that I'm looking at row 0 only, I only have 2 rows, and each column will be on this second number here. Okay, so it's going to add those names to that list. That's how you access the first row of data. The second row, then you would do something similar. I'm going to add Alex's weapons, so you can put a plus here like we did earlier, plus, comma, and then space, plus enemies of 1 dash 0. Okay, because now I'm dealing with the next row, which is row 1, and the column is still going to be 0. So I'm starting the 0 position again, and to get that. So if I copy this, put it inside each of these, and I just update the columns here, be like 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so now I grab the correct data and display it to each individual character. All right, so this way it's a little bit easier to maintain, but the only thing is that they all have to be only strings, right? So you cannot store numbers, anything like that. So if it's string in text, this is kind of useful, but otherwise it's not that useful here. And a very common feature that you would do this is not the names but numbers, right? Numbers, it's a grid. Think about a grid of scores or whatever it is, like a 3x4 or a 10x10 table, a grid. That inside those grids you have numbers, like a bunch of numbers, or maybe a bunch of names of whatever it is. Okay, so maybe like the row 0's names could be enemy for level 1. The row 2 could be the enemies only for level 2, and row 3 will be enemies only for level 3, things like that, right? So when we are level 2, something like that, you say, okay, I'm going to reference the second row. Those are the enemies will show up there. Okay, so you can see it's a table of enemy names. And if you map that directly to another 2D array of the weapons or of the HPs, then you can still map that too. So you have 2 or 3 or 4 2D arrays of data. But again, when you put this together, just make sure they match up correctly to the correct positions. So when you reference these numbers, they pull the correct data. Here I have the enemies. Let's just say these are their names. If I want to grab all the enemies' HPs based on the same position, then you create another one here, maybe HPs in 2D, not 1D, but the same index. So again, back to that parallel arrays again. We're using 2D array instead of just 1D. Okay? And the 2D tables are very common. You see things like an Excel sheet and a website, the very classic multiplication table. Okay, homework assignments like the classes and then the grades underneath that, or and so on. If you think about the array of a table of a database, the names, their weapons, the location, the HPs, going column-wise. But we can't do that in C# because it's not, we are restricted to using only the same data type. So it's not that simple unless you use database, which is why we need databases to store data. We'll learn that much later in the course. Okay, so that's just all I want to cover here. And tomorrow when we come in, I'll see if we can, kind of use this a little bit more. There are some other functions you can use in here as well for sorting arrays. You can sort it. You can do more stuff with it. This is just, I'm just showing you how do you store data, how do you retrieve it. You can sort it as well and do so much more. You can replace content and so on. Okay, and then maybe on Thursday we will apply this to our game. And then on Friday, so please think about this. On Friday, I want us to come up with some of the things or the properties or features we want to apply to our main character and the main town. Okay, so things that are common. And so thank you, and I will see you guys tomorrow, and have a great afternoon, and stay dry.